Welcome everyone to The Detail. I am your host, Kathy Antunes, and you are listening to The Detail on WSLR 96.5, LPFM in Sarasota, Florida, and WBPV 100.1 LPFM in Bradenton, Florida. Well, we've got a special election coming up. Next Tuesday is Election Day, the referendum on the school tax. It's the extra mill to fund schools, which has been in place. It gets reevaluated every 4 years. Voters get to weigh in, but we've been approving that since 2002. So early voting is underway. You can go to the polls in Sarasota County. The first question is about the school tax. The second question has to do with whether or not how we're going to elect county commissioners. And in 2018, Sarasota County voters approved by about a 60% to 40% margin, which is considered in most political arenas, that's called a landslide. It's a decisive victory. And in every single district, districts 1 through 5 in Sarasota County, the result was consistent, that Sarasota County voters chose to go to a single member district method for choosing county commissioners. So question 2 is about, are we going to keep single member districts? In other words, if you live in District 1, do you just choose the commissioner for District 1? Or do we go to at-large voting, which is choosing every single commissioner? And proponents say, oh, you should be able to choose all of them. It increases your voice. And those who are critical and want to keep single member districts say, you know, this is actually not in our interest because it dilutes accountability. And you're better off, just as, you know, for state legislature, you vote for your district, for Congress, you vote for your congressional district. So too for county commissioners. That way, the people who know what's going on in the district can get to choose, replace. It's very hard without large voting to keep track of the whole county. So that's the issue. And the amendment is written in such a way that a no vote means keeping single member districts, and a yes vote means going back to at-large voting. A lot of people find it confusing. There's really been overwhelming community support for keeping single member districts. I know the ACLU, both the Sun newspapers, the Herald Tribune has come out in favor of a no vote on question 2. And the Citizens for District Power have been very active in this question. But today I want to review and walk through some of the dark money, political action committee money that we've seen active in this question on single member districts in Sarasota County. So if you are watching this, I am going to put it up on YouTube. We may be posting it on Facebook, and the so walking through what's happening with the mailers that are coming in Sarasota County. And I joined Citizens for District Power last Friday to share this research with the press. You may be seeing mailers like this, holding it up. It says at the bottom, and you always want to look when you get a political mailer, who's paying for it? That's really critical. So this political mailer and many others it says paid political advertisement, paid for by Suncoast Alliance, 115 East Park Avenue, Suite 1, Tallahassee, Florida, 32301. So I'm just going to start off with, you know, what exactly is a political committee? Let's talk about that before we get into this. And political committees are required to file in the arena where they're active. So a political committee, by definition, is, I'm just going to see if I can pull up this definition. So those of you who are following along, it's easy for you. So the definition of a political committee, this is a combination of two or more individuals or a person other than an individual, right? This is Citizens United. It can be a company. It doesn't have to be a person. So in aggregate, they give an amount in excess of $500 during a single calendar year. And this committee accepts contributions for the purpose of donating to a candidate or a political committee. They accept contributions for the purpose of advocating in an election for the defeat of a candidate or issue. And that's what we're talking about here, is an issue. Makes expenditures that expressly advocate for the election or defeat of a candidate or issue, or makes contributions to a common fund other than a joint checking account between spouses, from which contributions are made to any candidate, political committee, or party. So the committee actually doesn't necessarily have to spend on an election or a candidate. They can simply take funds that they then give to a candidate or committee for an issue. So they can simply be a conduit. Some political committees don't actually buy advertising. They simply gather money and distribute it. Actually, eliminating that aspect would be a good way to impede the flow of dark money. So that's one thing to be aware of, is the definition. What is the definition, right, of a political committee? So this Suncoast Alliance is a political committee that is out of Tallahassee, working to influence this issue about single member districts. So now I'd like to show you, take a look at their registration, but also what are the rules about the scope of a political committee? How are they supposed to function, and where are they supposed to function? So I'm sharing information here about how a political committee is supposed to file in the state of Florida. And this is straight out of the Political Committee Handbook from the Division of Elections. And it talks about where you're going to file. It has to do with the area, scope, and jurisdiction related to any political committee. So political committees that are supporting or opposing statewide legislative multi-county issues, they file with the Division of Elections. That means the state website, right? So the idea being, if there's a political committee active in a statewide issue, you should be able to find that committee on the state's website. Now, if a political committee is supporting a countywide issue or candidate, then you're supposed to be able to find them at the supervisor of elections in your county. So you would go to SarasotaVotes.com and you would look for, if you got a mailer about a county issue, you would look for them, you know, for instance, Suncoast Alliance, this is a county issue. Your first place, you know, that you would look is the supervisor of elections. And that is where countywide PACs that are active in countywide issues, that's what the rules require. And then if you live in a city, right, the city of Sarasota or Venice, if you have, you know, an issue, maybe it's a charter amendment, changing the charter, or a city candidate, if there's a PAC that is active in that race, they're supposed to be registered with the city that they're active in. Now, why do these rules exist? You know, the idea is ideally, it's supposed to be easy for the voter to know who's influencing them, who is paying to influence your vote. And the way that these PACs, well, first of all, there are many PACs registered with the state that are active in countywide elections. And there is a loophole if they've ever been active in a countywide election. Some people argue that because they have, then it's valid for them to be active. If they've been active statewide, a political committee can be active countywide. I frankly think, I'm not sure that's true, but certainly when you look at the political committee handbook put out by the state, the spirit of the law is evident that voters are supposed to be able to go to their respective level of government, wherever a political committee is active, and find the committee there. Here we've got Suncoast Alliance, which is flooding Sarasota County voters with mailers, and you're not going to find it at the Sarasota County Supervisor of Elections website. You are going to find it at the Division of Elections. And that in and of itself, a lot of times we leapfrog over these really simple aspects that are game changers, right? I mean, most people at some point, if you're a voter in Sarasota County, you're probably going to go to that website and have some degree of familiarity with what's going on with the county website. But to have to go to the state website and navigate that, which is a lot bigger, may not be as easy to use, lots more committees to sift through. Why should voters have that burden, right? Seems to me the burden should be on those financing to provide clarity and make it easy for voters. So, you know, we've got a situation just there with political committees and how they work, which would be to everyone's benefit, certainly the voters' benefit, to have that cleaned up. And that's just one issue. But I'd like to turn now, because I put together a flow chart of the funding and some of the relationships between PACs when it comes to Suncoast Alliance. So I'll take a second and share that with you all. Okay, so everybody, if you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook, you'll be able to see the graphic. And for my listeners, I'm going to walk you through some of these relationships with dark money. The definition of dark money from my perspective is when the donors are obscured, when a voter has a hard time knowing who's funding any particular initiative. That to me, by definition, is dark money. There are some different definitions out there, but honestly, voters have a right to know who's trying to influence their vote. And if you can't find it, or you can't be sure, or the money's being handled in a way that keeps you in the dark, that for me is dark money. So Suncoast Alliance has, it was established in the year 2018. It is a political committee registered in Tallahassee. And we can take, a look at that registration. So the registration on the State Division of Elections website for Suncoast Alliance indicates that it's a political committee, that it's active, and the address, just like on the mailer, it says 115 East Park Avenue, Suite 1, Tallahassee, Florida. It's interesting. There's a DC phone number. It's a 202 area code. So that's Washington, DC. Why that would be is, you've got a DC phone number active in a Sarasota County referendum. The chairperson is William S. Jones. And if you've been listening to the coverage or watching it about this PAC's activity, Mr. Jones has been in the news. He's also the treasurer. So Mr. Jones is the person that is doing the accounting here. And then the registered agent is a Mr. Coates, who is also at the same address. So this is what, the registration is on the state website, Division of Elections. So the most recent financial filing for Suncoast Alliance shows that it has a total of $310,000 and a change, almost $311,000 that have been donated since 2018 in its coffers. In the fall of 2021, Benderson Development put in $9,000. And then most recently, this was recorded in January of 2021, $100,000 was put into the Suncoast Alliance coffers. And right now, the filings show that ads totaling $21,579 have been paid for. So those mailers, it stands to reason, because they've been going out in the same time frame, that $21,000 is, going for some of these mailers, but that wouldn't account for all of them. I think there's been 3 or 4 at least that have gone out. Now, here's the really interesting thing, and I've updated this schematic, this flow chart, to account for some of the dead ends, what I'm calling like strategically obscure accounting. Suncoast Alliance records their contribution coming from what they write, or what Mr. Jones has put in there, is Serious Conservatives C4. And it's listed as a political committee. So when you go to the Division of Elections website in Tallahassee, the political committee with that name, a political committee with that name, Serious Conservatives C4, doesn't exist. Now, a lot of people are familiar with 501c4s, which, by the way, that's not what this says. It just says C4 after the name Serious Conservatives, and it says a political committee. But a 501c4 is recognized by the IRS as a nonprofit. It's often maybe called a social welfare organization or a nonprofit. And 501c4s can donate to candidates and endorse candidates, and they can be active with contributions for political issues. And they don't have to disclose their donors. There's a lot of obscurity with a 501c4. And, a lot of people have jumped to a conclusion like, oh, well, it must be a 501c4. And I caution people against that. Look, Mr. Jones is a professional, right? He manages a bunch of political committees. Actually, his address is affiliated with every political committee I'm going to be talking about with regard to the money flow here. And he is listed as an administrator on 3 of them. When a political committee donates and you can't find them, you don't know who the administrator is, but they're all at his address. So, one dead end where you can't trace the money is if you're recording a donation from an entity that doesn't exist, that, it's located in Tallahassee. It says it's a political committee, but when you go to the Division of Elections website, Serious Conservative C4 doesn't show up. So one major problem is you've got a donation from Suncoast Alliance coming from an entity that doesn't exist. According to the state, it's not there. Now, there is a political committee called Serious Conservatives. Okay, so that does exist. And Serious Conservatives has $161,000 and $161,557 in their coffers. Now, here again, there's another dead end that I want to explain to you. And this is where some really monumental contributions coming from Pat Neal. I've found and traced that Mr. Neal contributed $750,000 to a PAC called Conservatives, a political committee called Conservatives. Now, Conservatives is also administered by William Jones. It is also at 115 East Park Avenue, Suite 1 in Tallahassee, Florida. And Conservatives, this political committee, has taken in over $3 million in contributions. and Pat Neal contributed. He made a number of contributions totaling $750,000. So conservatives made a donation of $100,000 to serious conservatives. And this is the PAC I was just talking about that definitely exists, right? It is also a William Jones PAC. So Mr. Jones took money from conservatives, a PAC he administers, and then he made the contribution to serious conservatives, another PAC that he administers. Although, oh wait, I spoke too fast. He wrote that down on the ledger of the conservatives PAC, right? That this 100 grand was going to serious conservatives. That's another PAC that he administers, same address. Now, when you go to the serious conservatives ledger, so it's an expenditure for the conservatives PAC. It's there, it's 100 grand, but it is not recorded on the serious conservatives ledger. So you got another dead end here where instead of, the money is coming out of a committee that you can see, right? But it's going into, it's recorded into an entity that exists that's also administered by Mr. Jones, serious conservatives. But then when you go to the serious conservatives ledger, that contribution isn't there. It's just not there. So again, there's this dead end with the money trail where money's going out, but you don't see it recorded coming in. Bizarre. Especially bizarre since William Jones administers so many political committees. Is this, he can't keep track, or is this a strategic omission, right? I mean, because what PAC managers are selling to these donors who are funding, right? I mean, who are they really working for? They're really working for the people who they're taking contributions from, right? And what do these people want? They want efficacy for their money. They want to be effective in influencing elections, whether it's a referendum on an issue or it's a candidate, but they also don't want to be known, right? They want what's called plausible deniability. In other words, yeah, okay, we really can't say it's definitely you. Or they just want complete darkness and anonymity where absolutely no one could know who they are. So the PAC manager does have an incentive, a motivation for maybe not being so clear, right? Because part of what they're selling to the donor is the donor doesn't want to be known. And in this case, not recording 100 grand from a political committee that is funded by Pat Neal, right? He's got 750 grand in this PAC conservatives. They flip a donation to serious conservatives, but it's not actually recorded on the serious conservatives ledger. So there's the second dead end. Now there's a third dead end. Serious conservatives does record $100,000 from a donor called Conservative Leadership Committee. Now, when you see an entry from a donating entity, they have to give their address. And the address is the same as Mr. Jones's business address, 115 East Park Avenue in Tallahassee, Suite 1. And it says it's a political committee. So Conservative Leadership Committee is recorded on the serious conservatives ledger, by the way, on the very same day as that dead end donation from conservatives. $100,000 isn't coming in from conservatives, but it's coming in from Conservative Leadership Committee. The problem is that when you search the state website for Conservative Leadership Committee, there is none. It is not there. So there's the third dead end. Two of these dead ends have to do, there are political committees that can't be found, donating $100,000. And the other, the third mistake is the one where a donation isn't recorded in the receiving PAC, Serious Conservatives. So lots of dead ends in the money trail here that you can only find just by continuing to dig, which is a job that frankly no voter should have to do. And when the game is to sell confusion and to sell anonymity, it's fair in that context to take a look at this set of facts and ask, what is really going on here? Because everybody wants to know who's behind the Suncoast Alliance flyers. So, offering this information to voters in Sarasota to say, this is what I've found. You can do the research yourself. If you want to go to division, it's dos.elections.myflorida.com/committees. And when you go to that website, you can do your own research into all kinds of committees in the state of Florida and track the money yourself. But you'll see this information there. And I think you'll find it's pretty interesting and certainly confusing. The last piece here that I included is conservatives made payments totaling $57,500 to Key Point Communication. And this was between November of 2020 to January of this year, 2022. So $57,500 in payments to a communication business. And it's interesting, the principal of that business, her name is Marianne Gerchik. If you were to go to sunbiz.org, as I said, this is Marianne Gerchik. And Marianne Gerchik is a political consultant, and she is also the former mayor of Sarasota, City of Sarasota Commissioner Hagan Brody. This is his significant other. So to know that the significant other of a sitting commissioner in the city is receiving remuneration. She's a consultant. There's nothing illegal about that. A lobbyist. She has submitted, lobbyist disclosures as part of her work with Key Point Communication, her company. But the payments are coming out of a political committee, which is heavily funded by Pat Neal, and that financial relationship may be relevant to voters. It's something to be aware of. So what does this mean? The bottom line is there's $100,000 that came into a PAC that's looking to influence your vote to keep at-large voting. And no one can say for sure where it really comes from. There are three dead ends in the money flow related to this donation, either through the names of the PACs, mainly through this name, Serious Conservatives. And that raises red flags. One of those dead ends is in the money trail coming from Mr. Pat Neal, who put $750,000 into the PAC Conservatives. And that PAC records it going out to a PAC called Serious Conservatives. But Serious Conservatives doesn't record it. So why should you care? Well, someone's trying to influence your vote and they don't want you to know who they are. But as I've talked about many times on this show, the county commission is hugely important in local politics when it comes to real estate. And real estate fortunes are made just making land use decisions. which is something, is the bailiwick of the county commission. I mean, they'll decide where apartments go. They can rezone land from agricultural to rural, and that's where actually the biggest windfalls come for landowners and developers. I want to remind you all, you're listening to The Detail on WSLR 96.5 LPFM in Sarasota, Florida, and WBPV 100.1 LPFM in Bradenton, Florida. We have a special election coming up on Tuesday, March 8th. Early voting is already underway. You can go to sarasotavotes.com to find out where you can vote early, and of course to check out your precinct for the referendum on March 8th. So be sure to do your civic duty and vote. Getting back to this idea of how are fortunes made because of the county commission? Well, if you buy rural land, and a lot of times the business model that we see here in Florida is for influential developers or landowners to take their rural land or buy rural land and keep it in a tax bracket that belongs in agricultural use. So sometimes you'll see cows. In fact, there's this parcel along Fruitville Road near I-75 between the Public Shopping Center and Cattleman. And it's a great example of what's called leapfrog development, because it's this huge swath of undeveloped land surrounded by developed land, right? So the infrastructure investments have already been made, and there are cows on this property. So it's likely still being taxed in an agricultural designation, and which is a much lower tax bracket. But if you can take land that's zoned agricultural and then go to a county commission where you're highly influential and get, because you funded PACs or you funded their campaigns or both, right? We see that in Sarasota. We see major donors funding both political committees as well as campaigns. Then, because they are receptive to your requests, you can get a change, right? You can get agricultural land changed to residential. If you're lucky, they'll pay for the infrastructure. We see that a lot, that the county will pick up the infrastructure bill, which is really, the taxpayers paying for it. And the value of the land, just even if it's undeveloped, because you can now put houses on it or apartments or commercial, the value of the land has changed dramatically. So this is what's behind a lot of the special interests working to influence the county commission, and why many of you may not think county commissioners. In fact, when I give talks, often I'll ask, how many of you can name your 5 county commissioners? And in a room of 100 people, maybe 5 hands go up. And these are people who really are paying attention to local politics. But there's sort of an anonymity and a lack of focus on how important the county commission is, until actually, for most people, there's a problem in their backyard and they realize that these are the decision makers. And then it can be very shocking to realize that your district commissioner, who you think is supposed to be representing you, may be voting against what your district wants. And that was the whole impetus for single member districts, so that commissioners were to be more accountable. That's why 67% of county commissioners in Florida are single member district. Obviously, a lot of people in Florida prefer this, but that was the reason in Sarasota County that the local citizens got together in a nonpartisan group, the Sarasota Alliance for Fair Elections, and said, hey, wait a minute, we need them to be accountable to us. So just wanted to share that money flow, but there's more information actually that's brand new that I am wanting to provide as well. So hang on a second, I'll pull that up. So I just thought I'd share a little more information about the motivation to impact the county commission and what for many people is kind of a mid-level management sort of aspect of government that a lot of people don't pay attention to or think matters very much. But I've talked about how getting land rezoned so that you can build a lot of houses or so that you can build commercial on undeveloped land. Agricultural land is probably the least expensive land you can buy around here. And let's just take a look at what some people would call the land banking that is that has gone on, and specifically I'm thinking of Mr. Neal. Okay, so what I'm quoting from are articles, information that was shared in the Herald Tribune between the years 2012 and 2014. And that, you know, in the real estate section, or there were just some articles taking a look at the land acquisitions of Pat Neal. And of course, you know, he's somebody who's demonstrated tons of interest in county commission races, sponsors big fundraisers for his preferred candidates. And, you know, one of the other big concerns about at-large elections in a county our size is that it's like running for Congress, right? Because you have to reach over 400,000, a population of over 400,000, which is on the level of, you know, a lot of congressional districts have that many people. So it benefits special interests who have the money to cover that kind of area to have at-large voting, and actually may make campaigns a lot cheaper simply because the little guys just don't even try. You know, the grassroots candidates won't even get in the game because they know they're totally outgunned. But what's the motivation? So getting back to these land buys, you know, I put up a screen for those who are going to be able to see this, but for my listeners, it shows a total of 1,353 acres, and that the price paid by Mr. Neal for these different parcels is just about $31 million. And the price per acre ranges from, well, 14,000. Sometimes here there's $60,000 an acre. There's 10,000. The cheapest is 5,000. And that's in Englewood, the Boca Royale Golf and Country Club. The acreage there, 333 acres. Border Road in Venice, when that was bought, 124 acres for 1.8 million. And we know that's been developed. So there's Border Road in Nokomis, 368 acres. That was about 32,000 an acre. But you can see just huge investment in over 1,300 acres. And it's really in somebody's interest who has that much investment in local land to, you know, be able to convince the county commission and have friendly commissioners who are going to be willing to say yes to residential development, give you a break on infrastructure, or what many understand, you know, impact fees. They fund infrastructure. So this is, you know, one important piece of the puzzle to understand the motivation of someone like Mr. Neal, who's made a lot of investment in rural lands or undeveloped land. And the other thing that can happen for people who invest in county commission races is getting a good deal on the sale of public land. I mean, we've seen people in the city of Sarasota, certain developers, they may want to, you know, take over an existing amenity like Lido Pavilion, right? We saw a developer want to put a big sports bar in there at the Lido Pavilion, and it would have been a huge increase in density and intensity. It would have required a comprehensive land use change. Comp plan changes aren't just about density, though. They can also just change the nature of a structure. So here are two examples, and these are from public records of two developers. And by the way, one of them is Benderson Development. And I should say we absolutely know that Benderson Development has contributed $9,000 to Suncoast Alliance. So Benderson money is definitely in that political committee. And here, this example, which many people may remember, 42 acres near Fruitville Library, that was appraised at $5 million. And it was sold to the county, sold by the county, right? Because this was our public land. It was sold to Benderson Development for $2 million less than the appraised value. It was sold for about $3 million, $3 million. So I put savings in quote. I mean, it could be a very efficient investment to put tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars into local elections for county commission if you're going to get this kind of a price break on land, right? If you're going to just pay, a third or half of what something is worth. So in this case, the appraised value was reported in the newspapers at $5 million, and the county sold it to Benderson Development for $3 million. I believe it was a 3-2 vote. There were two dissenting votes, if my memory serves. Nora Patterson and I believe Charles Hines were the consenting votes at that time. And then the other, now this is from the city of Bradenton. So Pat Neal bought some land, 64 acres, from the city of Bradenton, the appraised value, $4.2 million, and the actual price that it was sold for, $3.2 million. And then the supposed, again, savings in quotes, but that's a price break of $1 million. So you can quickly see, when it comes to land and buying land and developing land, why having a favorable county commission, one that is, friendly to your interests, is very useful. So I'm going to get into a story that some of you certainly have heard. And if you haven't heard it, a lot of people are very surprised when they hear this story. And again, there's going to be a graphic if you're seeing this on YouTube. I call it the $7 million SMR 2050 hustle. So what do I mean by that? SMR is Schrader Manatee Ranch, the developer of Lakewood Ranch. And for people familiar with the county, Sarasota County created a comprehensive land use plan back in the early 2000s. It was around 2002. And Sarasota County won awards for this plan. It was to guide development east of the urban service boundary, which is really, think of it as east of I-75, but it's called the urban service boundary because certainly at that time, the land was largely undeveloped, it was rural, and so it did not have urban services. Think of that as infrastructure. We hadn't made infrastructure investments east of I-75. And so there was a different land use plan for that agricultural, mostly rural area. And it basically said, look, if you want to develop this land, you're going to have to abide by either go with the existing zoning, but if you want to do more, we'll let you, okay? We will let you develop more densely, but you're going to have to do it in a certain way. You're going to have to make it compact, kind of like a European village. If you've ever, been on an airplane going into a European city, you look outside the city and there's these little villages where people are gathered to live and surrounded by like farmland. And so there's little cities basically. And so the density is in this concentrated area. And the idea with the 2050 plan was you can do this, we'll let you build more, but you've got to provide some open space. We need you to do that. So In 2003, the 2050 plan was in place, and Schrader Manatee Ranch owned Gum Slough. So this is, Gum Slough is environmentally sensitive land. A slough is like slow moving water in Florida. And Gum Slough, they had the right to develop in all of this land they have south of University, which is now being developed as waterside. They had the rights to build 5,000 dwellings in the village. You know, they were calling it the Villages of Lakewood Ranch. Now, Sarasota County has an environmentally sensitive lands protection program. What does that mean? We all put a little bit of money in so that the county can buy land and conserve it, right? Buy land and keep it for habitat, for animals, just keep this quality of life and, you know, keep some of our lands pristine so that we don't lose species and we have nature. So anyway, Schrader Manatee Ranch approached the county and they said, we would like to sell some of our development rights. And so the county in 2004 purchased the development rights for Gum Slough, and that translated into the development rights for 2,500 dwellings. So that 5,000 unit allowance permission to build 5,000 dwellings that Schrader Manatee Ranch had, they got the $7 million in 2004, and then the permissions, what were they selling? Not the actual land itself, but the right to develop it. That's what they were selling. So they sold that for $7 million, okay? So Sarasota taxpayers paid $7 million to retire the development rights for Gum Slough. And, you know, pretty fair deal, right? And within 6 months, if you look at the newspaper articles, Mr. Rex Jensen began complaining that he no longer had the density he needed to make his development work, that the 2050 plan didn't work because it wasn't generous enough when it came to development rights. And how could this be financially viable? Blah, blah, blah. At that time, John Thaxton was a commissioner and he called him out. He said, look, you know, basically you sold your development rights. Okay. So you can have the $7 million or you can have the development rights, but you can't have both. Okay. That was in 2004. And folks, this is where, you know, this is the long game, right? There are people who keep close tabs on the county commission. They do business. It's often real estate, and they want to have influence there. So, you know, Mr. Jensen was told, no, you're not going to get any more development rights. And he went away for a while. But in 2010, the county commission gave him both using what's called open space credits. They called it something different. And Schrader Manatee Ranch received 2,500 open space credits. In other words, they got the right to build completely restored. They got their 5,000 units back, and they kept our $7 million. So I'm going to say that again. They sold these development rights in 2004. Schrader Manatee Ranch got $7 million of Sarasota County taxpayer money, complained within a pretty short period of time that they didn't have enough development rights. John Thaxton says, look, you can have the money, the $7 million or the development rights, but you can't have both. And in 2010, they got both because the Sarasota County Commission restored 2,500 units in development rights to Schrader Manatee Ranch. So this is the long game, folks. It is highly cost effective and efficient for certain developers to invest in county elections, because when it comes to their permission to build, how much they can build, getting infrastructure paid for, it's chump change to put 10 grand or more into a county commission election when you can get millions of dollars back in reduced land prices, in infrastructure being subsidized with county tax dollars, in getting, increased development rights. It's all a very efficient investment. And so this just explains what can be behind big money from the development community going into political committees and then being flipped or not accounted for properly. And then we wind up with $50,000 of commercials and tons of mailers, and the voters don't know what's going on in terms of who's trying to influence my vote. So there's just one last piece of information I want to share about those $50,000 in commercials. So I've got some information to share with you all that came to me via Ron Collins. And he is somebody that, if you've listened to the show before, he has worked on redistricting, looking at the data that the county has used to what many would call gerrymander districts for their benefit. He's just kind of a data guru. And what you're looking at right now, I'm sharing my screen. These are two documents from Comcast, and they document the spending of Suncoast Alliance. And there have been some television commercials that have played on, I believe it's MSNBC, and Suncoast Alliance. They haven't reported this spending. Ron Collins was able to get this data by asking Comcast about Suncoast Alliance's spending. And if you go down to, looking at the bottom, we've got $22,000 worth of television ads on one contract, and then another one going to the bottom. And I'll start at the top, so those who are seeing it, you can see this is McLaughlin Media, but it's a Comcast subsidiary, I believe. National Cable Communications. The entity he asked for the data from was Comcast, and the customer is Suncoast Alliance. So 22,000 on one invoice, and then on this one it says 26,000. So that's about 48. Well, actually the order total is 30 grand. Anyways, close to $50,000 on television ads that have been airing in Sarasota County in support of overturning single member districts. So just more information about the magnitude of the spending out there that's coming from Suncoast Alliance. We don't know for sure who is funding them. I've shared with you the money relationships and questions, the information that I found during my research based on the limited data that is available in the Suncoast Alliance ledgers. So anyway, be sure to vote this Tuesday if you haven't already. Early voting has started. And this is the Sarasota County special election for school funding. That's the first question. And then how we are going to elect our county commissioners is the second question. Thank you all so much for listening. You've been listening to The Detail on WSLR 96.5 LPFM in Sarasota, Florida, and WBPV 100.1 LPFM in Bradenton, Florida. Make it a great day.